Money doesn't disappear all at once. It hesitates. It stutters. And then, one ordinary day, it stops working. Not because paper lost ink. Not because numbers vanished from screens. But because belief quietly died. Stay with me till the end of this story. Because once you understand how money actually fails, you will never look at your savings, your salary, or your currency the same way again. And if you want more stories like this, deep, uncomfortable, and real, subscribe now. Not for optimism, for awareness. We are taught that money is solid, reliable, permanent. We're taught that currencies collapse because of chaos, wars, corrupt politicians, bad luck. But history tells a far more disturbing truth. Money doesn't break during panic. Panic begins when money is already broken. Every major currency collapse in history starts the same way. Quietly, legally, with signatures, speeches, and reassurances. No riots, no headlines. Just policy decisions that seem reasonable at the time. To understand the day money stops working, we have to unlearn almost everything we believe about money. Money is not value. Money is trust. A dollar, a peso, a mark, a lira, a rupee. None of them have value on their own. They work because millions of people agree every single day to accept them tomorrow. The moment that agreement weakens, money becomes just paper waiting for gravity to act. Currency crises do not begin at banks. They begin in budgets. They begin when governments spend more than they can collect. Not once. Not during emergencies. But structurally, year after year. Administration after administration. At first, deficits look harmless, a few percentage points. Justified by growth forecasts. Temporary stimulus. Political promises. When taxes aren't enough, governments borrow. Borrowing feels painless. No immediate sacrifice. No angry voters. Just bonds sold to investors who believe repayment is guaranteed, and for a while, it works. But debt has a personality. It grows. Interest compounds. Refinancing becomes routine. Budgets quietly shift from funding services to servicing past decisions. This is the first invisible crack. At this stage, nothing looks broken. Supermarkets are full, ATMs function. Salaries arrive on time. The public feels safe. But inside the system, pressure is building. When borrowing reaches its limit, governments face a brutal choice. Raise taxes. Cut spending, or create money. Raising taxes is political suicide. Cutting spending risks unrest. Creating money feels elegant. No direct pain. No immediate backlash. Just numbers added digitally. Central banks step in. They don't call it printing. They call it liquidity, stability, market support. This is where money starts to change. New currency enters the system. Not through wages, not through productivity, but through financial institutions. Asset prices rise first. Stocks, real estate, bonds. The wealthy feel richer. Governments feel relieved. Economists call it recovery. But something subtle happens beneath the surface. Each new unit of currency reduces the value of the existing ones. Not dramatically, not overnight, but persistently. Prices inch upward, rent rises. Food costs more. Healthcare becomes heavier. Workers don't panic, they adjust, they cut back. They blame corporations, greed, supply chains. Anything except the currency itself. This is the second crack. Inflation is not the crisis, it is the symptom. The real crisis is confidence erosion. When people notice their money buys less each year, they don't rebel immediately. They adapt. They save less. Spend faster. Invest in assets instead of holding cash. Velocity increases. This is dangerous. Because money only works when people are willing to hold it. When holding money feels like punishment, the system begins to destabilize. Governments respond with reassurance. This is temporary. Inflation is under control. Strong fundamentals. Words are powerful. Until they aren't. Meanwhile, debt continues to grow. And now it grows faster than the economy itself. This is the moment economists fear most. When growth cannot outpace obligations, to prevent collapse, more money is created. Larger interventions. Bigger programs. Emergency measures become permanent tools. Currency supply explodes. Productivity does not. This imbalance is lethal. Foreign investors notice first. They hold the currency not out of loyalty, but out of confidence. When confidence weakens, they exit quietly, selling bonds, selling currency, moving capital elsewhere. Exchange rates begin to slide. Imports become more expensive. Energy costs surge. Food prices accelerate. Governments blame external shocks, speculators, geopolitics, global conditions. But the core problem remains internal. Too much currency, too little trust. This is when the language changes. Transitory becomes persistent. Persistent becomes manageable. Manageable becomes complex. Interest rates are raised too late. And when they rise, they threaten the debt itself. Higher rates mean higher servicing costs. Budgets strain further. Deficits widen again. The system begins to cannibalize itself. To avoid default, money creation resumes. Only now everyone can see it. This is the final crack. The public doesn't need statistics anymore. They feel it. Shelves empty faster. Savings evaporate silently. Wages lag behind reality. Trust fractures. People don't ask, how much does this cost? They ask, how long until it costs more? That question marks the beginning of the end. Because once people expect money to lose value tomorrow, they refuse to treat it as money today. They convert. They hoard goods. They flee into assets. They abandon the currency psychologically long before it collapses officially. This is the day money stops working, not announced, not declared, but lived. In the next part, we will go inside real historical collapses: Germany, Argentina, Zimbabwe, Venezuela. Not to compare numbers, but to expose the identical sequence that always comes before the fall. Every currency collapse leaves behind photographs. Wheelbarrows of cash, worthless banknotes, empty shelves, desperate faces, but those images lie. They make the collapse look sudden, violent, unpredictable. It never is. To understand how currency crises actually begin, we have to go backward. Before hyperinflation, before panic, before collapse becomes visible. Germany, after the First World War, is remembered for money that lost value by the hour. But the mark didn't fail in the streets. It failed in conference rooms. After the war, Germany was buried under reparations. Debts denominated in foreign currencies. Obligations it could not meet through production alone. At first, the solution seemed rational. Borrow domestically, monetize deficits, stabilize employment. The printing presses ran quietly, carefully, just enough to keep the system alive. Inflation appeared, mild, acceptable, even helpful, some argued. Exports grew. Employment improved. Politicians celebrated recovery. But the debt never shrank. It only changed form. As the currency weakened, foreign creditors demanded more marks for the same payments. This forced even more printing. The loop tightened. By the time prices were doubling weekly, the collapse had already happened. Trust was gone. Citizens didn't abandon the mark because prices rose. Prices rose because citizens abandoned the mark. Argentina followed the same script. Decades later, different language, same mechanics, persistent deficits, chronic borrowing, political pressure to spend. To maintain stability, the peso was pegged, anchored artificially to a stronger currency. For a time, confidence returned. Capital flowed in. Consumption surged. But pegs are promises, and promises require discipline. When spending exceeded reality, the peg became a lie that demanded defense. Reserves drained. Debt ballooned. To protect the illusion, controls were imposed. Withdrawals limited. Conversions restricted. This was the moment money stopped being money. Not when inflation spiked, but when access was denied. Citizens realized their savings were conditional, permission-based, vulnerable. Trust collapsed overnight. The peso followed. Zimbabwe is often dismissed as an outlier. Too corrupt, too extreme, too different. That dismissal is comforting and dangerous. Zimbabwe's collapse did not begin with chaos. It began with land reform promises, budget shortfalls, and monetary accommodation. When productivity collapsed, currency creation filled the gap. At first, it kept salaries paid. Then it kept lights on. Then it simply delayed the inevitable. Hyperinflation was not the cause. It was the final symptom of a system already dead. Venezuela repeated the same cycle. Oil masked the cracks for years. When prices fell, money creation replaced revenue. Controls replaced markets. Denial replaced policy. The bolivar didn't fail because oil collapsed. Oil collapsed, and the bolivar was exposed, across continents, across ideologies. across centuries. The sequence never changes: overspending, debt, monetization, inflation, controls, collapse. The tragedy is not ignorance. It's delay. Every government believes it can exit in time. Every central bank believes credibility will hold. Every official believes the public won't notice. But money is a social contract. And contracts fail the moment one side cheats. Currency crises do not start when people panic. They start when policymakers choose convenience over truth. They start when short-term stability is prioritized over long-term trust. They start when money is asked to do what productivity cannot. In the next part, we will examine the most dangerous phase of all. The moment when authorities attempt to save a failing currency by controlling it. And why that decision, more than any other, guarantees collapse. When a currency begins to fail, governments rarely admit it. They manage it, they contain it, they control it. This is the most dangerous phase of the crisis. Because it feels like action and it feels responsible. Price controls are introduced to protect consumers. Capital controls are imposed to stop money from leaving. Exchange rates are fixed to restore confidence. On paper, it looks like order. In reality, it is the moment money stops being free. Money only functions when it can move, when it can be exchanged, when it can signal scarcity and value. Controls silence those signals. Price caps don't eliminate inflation, they hide it. When prices are frozen below reality, producers stop producing. Importers stop importing, shelves empty. Shortages appear not because goods vanished, but because truth was outlawed. Black markets form instantly, not out of greed, out of necessity. Two prices emerge. The official one and the real one. This dual reality is fatal for trust. Capital controls follow quickly. Limits on withdrawals, restrictions on transfers, approval requirements for currency exchange. The justification is always the same: prevent panic, protect reserves, maintain stability. But the message received by the public is very different. Your money is no longer yours. The psychological shift is immediate. People don't wait for instructions, they adapt. They convert salaries the moment they are paid. They store value in goods. They move wealth informally. Velocity accelerates further. The currency bleeds faster. To enforce controls, governments expand oversight. Surveillance increases. Penalties rise. Trust erodes completely. Banks become checkpoints, not intermediaries. At this stage, the currency is alive only by force, and force is expensive. Foreign trade suffers next. Suppliers demand hard currency. Letters of credit fail. Imports slow or stop. Energy shortages follow. Food scarcity intensifies. Inflation spikes again despite controls. The paradox becomes obvious. The more the state intervenes, the less the currency functions. Yet backing down is politically impossible. Admitting failure invites collapse, so the controls tighten. Money creation accelerates again, now to fund enforcement itself. This is monetary cannibalism. The currency feeds on its own credibility, until nothing remains. What makes this phase uniquely dangerous is that it feels survivable. People cope, they hustle, they endure. But the system is already past recovery. Once money requires permission, it ceases to be money. It becomes a rationing tool. This is the exact point where collapse becomes inevitable. The final stage is not hyperinflation. It is abandonment. Currencies do not collapse with an announcement. They are replaced. Quietly, organically, without permission. When people lose faith in money, they don't wait for reform. They improvise, barter returns, foreign currencies circulate hand to hand. Gold appears in drawers, goods become units of account. The official currency still exists, but it is no longer central. This is monetary death. Not when money loses value, but when it loses relevance. In every collapse, people stop asking what money is worth. They ask what will still be worth something tomorrow. Rent is negotiated in dollars. Wages are paid partly in goods. Contracts avoid the local currency entirely. The state still prints, still mandates, still enforces, but it no longer controls behavior. This phase exposes a brutal truth. Money works only when people believe it will work. No law can force that belief. At this point, inflation statistics become meaningless. The currency is not being priced. It is being rejected. Savings vanish, not because they were stolen, but because they were trusted too long. Pensions collapse. Insurance fails. Fixed incomes are destroyed first. Social order strains. not from hunger alone, but from betrayal. People realized the system did not break accidentally, it followed incentives, political cycles. Short-term survival, the pain is not shared equally. Those closest to money creation escape first. Those farthest from power absorb the cost, inequality explodes, institutions fracture. Legitimacy dissolves. By the time a new currency is introduced, the damage is permanent. Reforms are announced. Zeros are removed. New names are printed. But trust does not reset. It remembers. This is why currency crises echo for generations. Why grandparents warn. Why behaviors change permanently. People save differently, spend differently, fear differently. Money, once broken, never regains innocence. The final realization is simple and terrifying. Money does not fail because people panic. People panic because money has already failed. The day money stops working is not a date. It is a process. And it always begins long before anyone is willing to say it out loud. After money loses relevance, a society enters its most fragile phase. Not collapse, adaptation. Life continues. Markets function informally. People survive. And that is what makes this stage so deceptive, because survival looks like stability. But beneath the surface, the foundations are gone. When a currency dies, time itself becomes distorted. Long-term planning disappears. Contracts shrink. Trust horizons collapse to days, sometimes hours. Why invest in a future priced in a unit that won't survive it? Entrepreneurship turns defensive. Innovation slows. Risk-taking vanishes. Capital does not build, it hides. The economy stops growing forward and starts circling inward. This is where nations lose decades, not years, generations. Education suffers first. Because it is a long-term promise. Healthcare follows. Infrastructure decays silently. Not from incompetence, from uncertainty. Foreign capital does not return quickly. It has memory. Once burned, investors demand premiums, safeguards, control. The currency becomes permanently discounted, even after reform. This is the unseen cost of monetary failure, the tax that never expires. Governments eventually stabilize something. A peg, a dollarization. A new central bank law, on paper, order returns. Inflation slows, budgets balance, but the behavior does not reverse. People still convert quickly, still distrust banks, still treat cash as temporary. The currency survives, but it is no longer believed in, and belief is everything. This is why some nations grow slowly even after doing everything right. Why stability feels fragile. Why prosperity feels borrowed. The scar remains. Every currency crisis leaves behind a quieter population. More cautious, more suspicious, less willing to trust institutions again. Money was supposed to be the neutral tool, the silent servant. When it fails, it teaches a brutal lesson that systems are human, and humans choose shortcuts. The pattern is now unmistakable. Money does not stop working because of disaster. Disaster emerges because money was misused. The day money stops working is not marked by chaos, it is marked by normalization. When people quietly stop relying on it. And by the time that happens, no policy can reverse it. Only time, discipline, and memory. This is how currency crises actually begin. And this is why they never truly end. The most dangerous currency crises are not the ones that look broken. They are the ones that still look normal. Modern systems do not collapse like old ones. They soften the fall. They delay the pain. They spread the cost quietly. Digital money hides excess. Global markets absorb pressure. Complex instruments disguise fragility. This makes failure harder to see and easier to deny. Today, currencies do not fail from wheelbarrows. They fail from balance sheets, from promises stacked on promises, from obligations that assume tomorrow will be larger than today. Debt is no longer a warning sign, it is a foundation. Governments roll obligations forward indefinitely. Central banks normalize emergency tools. Intervention becomes policy. Policy becomes dependence. This is not collapse. It is suspension. Money keeps working because everyone needs it to, because pensions depend on it. Markets depend on it. Governments depend on it. This creates a dangerous illusion that necessity equals durability. But trust does not care about necessity. It cares about credibility. When citizens sense that money is being used to postpone consequences rather than reflect reality, behavior changes. Not loudly. Incrementally, savings shift toward assets. Cash becomes transitional. Long-term faith weakens. This is not panic. It is rational adaptation. And it mirrors every historical pre-collapse phase. Not in magnitude, but in direction. What makes modern currency crises unique is global synchronization. Many systems strained at once. Many currencies diluted together. Many central banks walking the same narrow path. This removes obvious escape routes. There is no untouched anchor, no unquestioned reserve, only relative confidence. When everything weakens together, failure does not look like collapse. It looks like erosion. Purchasing power fades slowly. Opportunity narrows. Future planning becomes cautious. People work harder for outcomes that feel smaller. This is how money begins to fail, without ever officially failing. The end does not arrive as a shock. It arrives as fatigue, as resignation, as lowered expectations. The day money stops working in the modern world will not be announced. It will be normalized. Not when systems break, but when people stop expecting them to protect value. History does not repeat because humans forget facts. It repeats because incentives do not change. Money is still trust. Debt is still a promise. And reality still collects its balance. The only difference now is how long the delay lasts, and how quietly the cost is paid. The most unsettling currency failures are the ones that never fully collapse. They simply decay. In the modern era, money is no longer backed by gold or land or production. It is backed by confidence in systems that assume continuity. That assumption has become the parallel, not to Weimar, not to Zimbabwe, but to late-stage empires that believed permanence was proof of strength. The modern currency system is built on rollover. Debt is not repaid. It is extended, refinanced, pushed forward into a future that must grow faster than obligations. This only works as long as belief holds. Technology disguises fragility. Digital balances feel permanent. Markets feel liquid. Payments feel instant. But speed does not equal strength. And scale does not equal stability. The chilling parallel is not hyperinflation. It is stagnation with dilution. A world where money still functions but no longer stores value reliably. Where growth exists but never reaches the individual. Where wealth concentrates upward not through conspiracy, but through mechanics. Assets inflate. Wages lag, savings erode quietly. This is not a crash, it is a transfer. A transfer from holders of currency to holders of assets. From the patient to the leveraged. From the cautious to the connected. This pattern has appeared before, at the end of reserve currencies, at the edge of dominance, when maintenance replaces discipline. The public is told the system is stable because it has not failed. But endurance is not health. When money stops rewarding saving, when work stops outperforming speculation, when the future feels smaller despite greater effort, the currency has already begun to fail in its most important role. The final stage does not look like chaos. It looks like acceptance, a generation that expects less, plans smaller, trusts institutions cautiously. This is how currency crises end in the modern world, not with destruction, but with diminished expectations. Money still circulates. Markets still open. Governments still function. But the promise is gone. The promise that effort today will translate into security tomorrow. That promise is what money was always meant to protect. When it breaks, the system continues, but belief does not. And that is the quietest and most dangerous failure of all.